There is one feature inside Serato that's been around for a while, and it's honestly one of the best things that they've ever added for scratch DJs, but hardly anyone uses it. It's called Scratch Banks, and it allows you to call up any song in your library at the push of a button. And in this video, I'm going to show you exactly how it works and why you should be using it too. Let's get into it. Okay, so in this video, I'm going to be using the DDJ Rev 7. And before we get started, I'm going to show you exactly what scratch banks are, how to use them in Serato, and then I'll show you what you can do with them. So here inside Serato, when you're connected to a device that allows you to use scratch banks, you will see this icon right here at the top of the screen. If you click this icon, you'll see the scratch banks section open up in the middle of the screen. Now you have 4 banks with 8 different slots. So that allows for 32 separate tracks to be loaded into scratch banks. And then you can instantly jump to any part of any song in your library at the push of a button. You don't need to go through your library, load the track in. You can just hit one pad and it will jump to a specific point on any track. Now right here, I have my own scratch sample tool, which contains all of my favorite scratch samples. And by the way, if you want to download that for free, then just hit the link in the description and I'll send them to your email. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag that scratch samples track onto the first scratch bank. And this is where you can customize each track that you load into a scratch bank. So right here with this drop down menu, this is where you can choose which hot cue on that track it will play from. So let's choose Q1. And now let's drag that same scratch samples file into a different scratch bank. And let's change this to cue number 2. And now let's drag another one into a scratch bank slot. And this time I'm going to change the cue to cue number 4. Now I'm also going to pull up one of my favorite scratch records and I'm going to load in a few samples from that scratch record. So right here I've got that scratch record. Let's drag that into scratch bank number 4 and let's change the drop down menu to cue number 5. And now let's drag another instance of that scratch record to a scratch bank slot and let's change this to cue number 2. And now let's pull up one more scratch record that I really like from back in the day. So let's drag this track into another scratch bank and let's change this to cue number 1 and then let's drag another instance of that and change it to cue number 2. So what we're essentially doing here is we're making our very own scratch record, and I can pull up any single one of those samples by triggering a pad. Now here on the DDJ Rev 7, you've got 2 options for accessing scratch bank. You can either press the dedicated scratch bank button right here, and what that will do is it will put the first 4 scratch banks on these buttons right here. Now this is great because it means that you can also have a pad mode selected, maybe hot cue or roll or sampler. But what you can also do is you can hold down Shift and press sampler, and then there you can see all of my scratch banks are here on the performance pads of the Rev 7. And they're even color coded as well, just like they are in the Serato screen. If we take a look at Serato again, you can see that for each single scratch bank, you can turn key lock or pitch and time on or off. So if you have this turned on, when you trigger that specific scratch bank, it will enable pitch and time DJ, otherwise known as key lock. Now, if you're using scratch banks to play tracks and you want the track to be at the original key, then this is a great feature. However, if you're going to be using scratch banks for scratch samples like I am here, you really want to make sure that key lock is turned off. Because believe it or not, pitch and time DJ inside Serato can cause artifacts when you're scratching and pitch and time DJ is enabled. So if you intend to use scratch banks to scratch up samples, then have this turned off for every one of those scratch banks. So now let's press play on this deck. And let's take a listen to these different samples that I've got loaded in. We can now trigger each one of those samples with these pads. And what it will actually do is it will load in a completely new track into the Serato deck and it will trigger it from the hot cue that we've specified. So now let's take a listen to these different samples. That's number 1. That's number 2.
That was fresh. That was fresh. That was fresh.
You win. You win. You win. Perfect.
So as you can see, I've made my own mini scratch record. Now you may have noticed that some of those samples were quieter than others, but there is a way to fix this. This track right here, which I've got on scratch bank pads number 6 and 7, this one's pretty quiet, but what I can do is I can change the gain knob right here inside Serato, and that means when that track is loaded in, it will play at a higher volume. So now let's take another listen.
You win. Perfect.
So now you can hear that the volume is way more matched. So now I'm going to do some scratching and show you how you can use scratch banks to trigger different samples instantly.
That was fresh. That was fresh. Fresh. That was fresh.
Perfect. You win.
If you're interested in learning more about scratching, then I teach all of the techniques that I just showed you inside my full Ultimate Scratching course. If you want to check it out, then just hit the link in the description. Scratch banks are awesome, and I don't know why more DJs aren't using it. And of course, the creative possibilities go way further than just making your own scratch record. Scratch banks could also be used to put together an entire DMC Red Bull freestyle type routine where you can jump between different tracks in your library instantly. And this is the kind of thing that I break down in way more depth inside my full course. Some of you may know that I provided the scratching for 2 Hollywood movies, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse and Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. And a couple of years ago, I was asked to be part of a live performance of the movie, where I am on stage performing the scratching that I did in the movie live alongside an orchestra. And for those performances, I use scratch banks at every show. There are so many different sounds that I need to scratch in those performances, and rather than going to my library, finding the track, loading it into a deck, and then triggering the hot cue, I just filled up all 32 scratch banks with all the different samples that I use, went into scratch bank mode on the DJM S9 mixer, and then triggered them immediately. It saved me so much time and saved me being on my laptop looking through my library during a live show. Now, if scratching is something that you want to improve at, then down in the description, you'll find a link to my Ultimate Scratching course, where I've put over 2 decades of knowledge and experience into over 80 lessons that cover every scratch technique that you could ever wish to learn. And there is also a beat juggling masterclass, where I break down some of the techniques that help me win the DMCs. The link is in the description if you want to check it out. Thanks for watching. I hope you found this useful. And if you want to check out more from me and my channel, then I recommend this video right here.